All right, and we are on. This is part 2 of, and I forgot what we called this, but
We were talking about psychotropic medications to manage mental and emotional and behavioral health conditions.
yes.
Yes.
And I think where we left off last time, you were going to talk about how some people, number one, are more needing of medication. Is that the right way to put it?
Right. I was going to talk a little bit about, Rob, how some people are predisposed to mental health conditions, and therefore they're also predisposed to possibly needing medications. And one of the ways that someone can be predisposed to needing management of their illness through medication is if they have post-traumatic stress disorder. And I'm sure you're really familiar with the term, but post-traumatic stress isn't always something that just happens and then you get post-traumatic stress disorder. There are people that are inherently traumatized, if that makes any sense.
What do you mean?
So someone that would be inherently traumatized would be a descendant even of someone that's been through the Holocaust, for example. So let's say you were reared by a Holocaust survivor. So imagine growing up with a parent or a grandparent that's been through a horrendous tragedy. That changes the way a person parents.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That changes the way a person parents. And so you can imagine that a person that's raised by someone that is deeply traumatized may inherently get trauma as well.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
And then take, for example, even being part of the African American community. If you are African American in this country, as much as you love your country and appreciate the struggles and the progress that have been made, there's still an inherent trauma in being African American.
Wow. Wow.
Because you've been part of what was long considered a subclass, and systemic oppression, racism, those sorts of things, it really changes the way the brain works. Trauma changes the way the brain is wired and works. And so in order to manage and navigate that trauma, you may need antidepressants or medication to handle anxiety because you're predisposed to these conditions being triggered just by your daily life.
Right, right. And I definitely want to talk about this. I don't know if this is the time, but, and I know I'm simplifying this, but there's the saying that you choose what goes in your mind. So besides doing medication, are there other things you can do? We may have talked about this on part 1. But things you can do to just be a more positive person, just bringing other positivity into your life.
Absolutely. The number one thing that I tell people that want to attempt to manage conditions without medication, because I'm all for it if that's a person's real choice and they can do it and can make the commitment that's necessary, it starts with a positive internal dialogue. I mean, Rob, people talk to themselves like crap largely. You know,
Yeah.
There's a tendency to beat up on yourself for things that you would never beat up on another person for.
Good point.
So the power of positive thinking really does go a long way, but it's really hard to be positive if people are in a negative environment, are accustomed to being negative.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah. And also, people that have grown up in households where one or both parents was an addict, whether it's a drug addict or an alcoholic, those sorts of experiences, dysfunctional living, traumatized living, it wires the way the brain thinks and interprets information. And so it can make a person prone to self-doubt, self-loathing, secrecy, chronic lying, substance abuse. It can predispose a person to substance abuse, or just negative behaviors. And it also shades the world. You've heard of rose-colored glasses? Well,
Yes.
whatever the opposite of rose is,
Yeah.
they see the world through that sort of lens, and with a lot of negativity around self, taking on things as being their fault that are not, feeling responsible for other people's happiness. And so definitely being a positive thinker and really telling yourself, I will not be a people pleaser, that's huge for anyone that does not want to manage their condition through medication.
And that's hard. Not to be a people pleaser. Everybody wants to
Wants to
Not
please
everybody,
and
but
wants to
yeah.
be liked.
Be liked,
and be
that's probably-
accepted.
Yeah.
Sense of belonging is really important for people. And so when they don't have that, then it can cause a person to spiral.
Yeah.
And I would also say for anyone looking to manage their depression or anxiety without the presence of medication, you have to become really structured. Stay away from the news.
Excellent.
And I
point.
know there are people that love the news. Their television's on CNN or MSNBC all day long, and they're getting news feeds across their phone nonstop. If you want to be a person that's a little more at ease, you just can't do that.
Okay. So yesterday morning with my girlfriend, morning was sitting down having coffee. It's a beautiful morning. She puts on the news. The first thing she did, and it was something about some double homicide or something. I said, see, how do we start our day off? There's nothing we can do about that. It's horrible. So I'm one of those people who really, I don't have the news on my, if I want to find the news, I can find it. But I don't watch it first thing in the morning. I don't have the news feeds on my phone.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's such a good point. Not that news is not important, but that's such a good point.
Right. It all depends on what you're capable of taking in.
Yeah.
And for me, I don't watch much news just because it makes it easier for me to execute what I have to do for the people that I care for my clients, if I don't have all of that. Because the news can really, make you think, wow, look at this world we're living in.
Yep.
And then, and I have to remind people around me, hey, if I haven't seen it or read about it, because I'll typically, if I'm going to get news, I read it. I still read newspapers and articles and stuff like that. That's how I like to get my news. For some reason, that puts a little emotional distance there for me.
Good point.
But yeah, I'll have people text and say, hey, I just saw this story, and a lady, they found babies from decades in her freezer. I'm like, really? You thought you wanted to share that with me?
I know.
Thanks, but no thanks. Yeah. And so And another way that people can manage their conditions without medication is something that's called transcendental meditation. And so what that is that it is putting your mind in a relaxed and meditative state, and it involves developing a mantra. When you see people meditate and you hear
Yes.
that's an actual mantra, and it does work. It works on the central nervous system and helps to soothe you and calm you down. But when I have patients, I like to tell them, come up with a mantra that is really meaningful to you. And if you repeat that mantra during your meditative state, get in a dimly lit area, sit either on the floor with your back against the wall and your feet flat, or if you must sit in a chair, just, dimly lit, really relax, and repeat your mantra to yourself over and over and over for 15 to 20 minutes.
Oh, wow.
That sort of thing. And that takes commitment, though.
Yes.
Doesn't it sound like that takes commitment?
And it's not long, but when you think about sitting there for 15 minutes, like I can do it for 5 minutes, I'm thinking, and I want.
Exactly. So you would be a great candidate for 7 mindful minutes. And 7 mindful minutes, you would get something to focus on. So you could either use a candle and light that candle like a tea light and watch it flicker, and then for the length of time that it takes that tea light to burn out, that's the length of time that you would spend meditating and concentrating. And so there are lots of ways we can train ourselves to be mindful. So
It's so funny, meditation. We should almost do a video on meditation. And
we should. That would be really
people
fun.
experience that all the time, loss of sleep, for reasons that, you just don't know. You just can't. Wow.
That's another thing. I literally just had this conversation on Monday. Have a client that has seasonal depression, and that impacts lots of people, seasonal affective disorder. where
What is that?
that's where you are depressed at the same time every single year, like clockwork.
Really?
Yes. And it can be really annoying and alarming for people. And so, of course, if someone has seasonal affective disorder, yeah, there are medications for that. But a person with that type of depression doesn't necessarily want to be on medication because it's only for a given length of time. And so I always encourage patients, hey, still meet with a psychiatrist and see if medication will help you for that interim, which it will, but I understand if someone doesn't even want it for that length of time.
Yeah.
So what we talked about was actually making sure that you structure your life to handle your season of sadness. And so it's important to be transparent with people around you. That's the number one tip, transparency. Let people know, hey, come February through June, I'm going to be depressed.
Okay, so I have to stop you right here. First of all, why is that, number one? And if someone told me that, if one of my friends would say, dude, well, what do you need, man? Get out of it. Again, I know it's just very... So what is it about the season, and what can they do? I know you're talking about it now, but I don't, what is it about the season?
Yeah, and so it can be a myriad of things. It could be body chemistry. It could literally be the season with the sun coming up, the sun going down. It could be any number of things. It could be environmental circumstances in their lives. Like, what if this is the busy season at your work and it just happens to coincide, your depression coincides with an uptake in stressors.
Okay.
So it can be all sorts of reasons, but definitely bodily. And I'm a person that I believe the sun, the moon, the stars, everything we're connected to, it impacts us.
That's a good point.
It impacts us, just like, not to skew, get totally off topic, but you've heard of sundowners with elderly people where they'll be sharp, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. They're sharp, they're coherent, they're understanding things. Sun goes down, they become emotional, confused,
Really?
things are distorted for them. Yeah.
Wow. No, so it's funny. So in the winter, I could see that as far as getting, because in the winter it gets darker quicker, it's colder. A lot of times, especially if you're up north, you're stuck indoors. I can see that. I can see that. I guess I was thinking about it springtime, summertime, but okay.
Yeah, and for a lot of people, spring and summer, they start to come on out of it. But yeah, so during those times, it's important that you make sure you're eating well-balanced meals. Make sure that the people around you know that you deal with this and are checking on you. And then make sure you have cues to yourself of like, okay, it's time to seek help. It's time to reach out. And so one of those things would be when you're having difficulty pushing through. Because even when you're feeling a little blue or tired, sometimes you can give yourself that nudge that says, hey, go do what you have to do. Well, when the nudge is no longer working, it's a sign that it's time to talk to somebody. And oftentimes, just making the commitment to come and talk to someone during that seasonal depression once weekly is enough. It's enough, and you can go without medication because you have someone holding you accountable to the things you're supposed to be doing to take care of yourself.
Okay.
You have someone holding you accountable saying, hey, you're supposed to be walking or you're supposed to be working out 20 minutes a day. Working out, any sort of physical activity, it gets the serotonin and the positive endorphins. It gets all of that going. So that's a plus.
Absolutely. And then we both go to gym. That is, sometimes when I'm really not in a good mood, or if I'm just stuck, I'm stuck in front of my computer editing video, and sometimes I just need to get out. And I'll go for a workout, and just that, I don't know if it's the blood flow or something, I come back, I'm more creative, I'm ready to get back into it.
Exactly. Yeah, you feel totally different.
Yeah.
And then for a lot of people that don't want traditional medication management, cannabis culture is really becoming popular, and so people are leaning towards that for management of anxiety, depression, other disorders. And also psychedelics like LSD therapy, that's become really popular again, and safe. You know, there are places out here that perform it and
Safe is a thing? What do you mean safe? Oh, you mean do it safely?
do it safely, not like
Yeah,
not like you're at Woodstock or something.
Getting together with your friends.
Yeah. And so that helps for a lot of people because it's about getting into a non-ordinary mental state, an altered state of consciousness. And so for a lot of people, LSD therapy helps to intensify their perceptual experiences, and then they can have breakthroughs during those times.
Really?
They can have breakthroughs that can break the chains of, from what people I know personally that have been through it and told me, they say it has broken the chains of like decades of trauma. That's what a client told me. She went to a retreat and it like really helped.
Somebody was just telling me, was just talking about psychedelics, or I saw it on, because I watch it now because of you, I watch a lot of this stuff on, there's some, therapists online that I listen to, and I think they were saying back, when did they first come out? 60s, 50s? But anyway, they experiment, it was just drugs. And then there were people in the medical industry experimenting it with, but not like correctly, let's put it that way. And they said there are people today that are using it just for the stuff that you said, which is, wow.
Yeah. And with THC products, low doses of THC have been shown to decrease and control anxiety and have a positive effect on depressive symptoms. Now, high doses, on the other hand, can cause people to have spikes in anxiety, freakouts, and can lead to drug-induced psychosis, which is a dangerous thing that you don't want. That's an altered perceptual state that you don't want, because during those times, people can feel very paranoid and can have a perceptual break with reality that in lots of cases may not be restored.
Wow.
And so that's why it's so important for people that want to use THC, cannabis, Delta 8, Delta 9, 10, all of those things, to really become educated about using those substances. And a lot of responsible vendors have workshops in their stores.
Okay.
So there are places out there where if you're purchasing the product from them, you can say, hey, when is your talk or when is your workshop? There's one not far from my neighborhood, and there's a place called Serenity Organics, and they, every Thursday, when they first opened for like 2 or 3 years, every Thursday they would have an educational forum every
Really?
Thursday evening. And it was open to the public. Anyone could come. You didn't even have to be purchasing product. You could just come, find out information, hear from people in the field and that help manufacture and distribute these products, and learn how to use them safely. So that's important.
Lola, what is your thoughts on, do you have any concerns about people turning to drugs or something, or is THC, is that considered a drug, I'm assuming?
Yes.
Turning to that too quickly or on their own without doing because there are people like, hey, you can't sleep, take this, as opposed to maybe there's other reasons why you can't sleep. So do you have I know that there's reasons for meds, there's no doubt. I'm not trying to say people shouldn't be on meds. But do you have a concern about people too quickly going on meds?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's something that the healthcare professional as a whole has really become concerned about over the years, and especially because of the opioid crisis. People can sometimes be overprescribed and can then in turn overuse. For whatever reason, people don't always like to go back to their practitioner and say, hey, this isn't working. I think I need a medication adjustment. Can we talk about something different? They want to start to figure things out themselves. And that's where things get really blurry and dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or if someone will have a friend that tried a drug or tried something and it worked for them, and of course they tell their friends, and someone else who's experiencing the same thing, they're going to jump on it. Or the opposite. Someone will say, I tried this, it didn't work. And then the person makes their decision based on that, which is part of the problem.
And one group that I see this happen to frequently would be our veterans. We have to do a better job at taking care of our veterans, because oftentimes it appears that they just have medication thrown at them without any real insight or information as to how these medications work and interact. And oftentimes they may be overprescribed. And I would say to anyone, if you are out of, running out of fingers as far as medication goes, then you definitely want to take a step back and have everything reevaluated just to see what's going on. I've seen people be on between 11 and 22 medications before.
Oh my God, wow. Wow.
And not a host of medications for all sorts of other medical ailments, but actually psychotropic medications. And the science has come so far to where that's really not necessary nowadays.
Yeah.
2, 3, 4 drugs can really get the results that a lot of people need.
Right.
Or even one drug, depending on what that drug is. For a lot of people, lithium is a great answer for bipolar disorder and severe depressions and mood disorders. However, you have to get your blood constantly checked when you're on lithium, and so it can be iffy for people, and it's always used as last resort.
Really?
But that may be a better resort than someone being on 8 other medications.
Right.
Yeah.
And then with every medication, there's always a side effect.
There can always be lots of possible side effects, and people worry about those, as they should. And so one side effect can be additional anxiety or additional depression, the things that you're trying to get away from, increasing. And that's because drugs aren't a fix-all. Sometimes the side effect can be increases in your symptoms that you're trying to manage, and it could even lead to suicidal ideation. And so that's why I tell people, hey, really take notes when you're taking your medication to see how you're feeling. Are you experiencing problems with your vision? Are you experiencing dryness with your eyes, dryness with your mouth? Are you experiencing brain zaps? For a lot of people, those are something that can be really bothersome because they're going along perfectly fine, and then they have these little brain zaps that feel like mini blackouts. And so you're losing some seconds.
Wow.
And if you're driving or doing anything of importance and you're mobile and you have a brain zap, it could be really dangerous.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people don't trust their body, so they'll experience it and then convince themselves that, no, that didn't happen. I didn't have a brain zap. Or they'll feel like, hey, when I was asleep last night, I kind of think I may have had a seizure. Did I have a seizure? No, I didn't have a seizure. Those sorts of things. And so it's really important to listen to your mind and your body and take notes.
I would imagine the hardest part about, or the challenging part about dealing with an issue with the way you see things, right? So your mental state, it's your mental state, so you don't know that it's right or wrong. How you see it, you think is right at that moment. So if you're depressed, right, you must feel like there's a reason for me to be depressed, as opposed to your perception is wrong, and I'm simplifying it, I know that. So, but when you're going through that, it's your own brain telling you this is how you feel.
Yeah.
So it's got to be hard to know that that is not correct.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important to speak up.
Yeah.
Really develop great relationships and rapport with your clinicians and advocate for yourself and what you need. I always tell people, don't be afraid to advocate for what it is you need. The professional's there to guide you, but they need to hear from you.
Yeah.
They need to hear from you. And please don't try and go off of your medication on your own, because that can lead to a whole host of issues.
Yeah.
Sometimes people have psychosis that's induced by antidepressant withdrawal, and it can lead to feelings of rage, violence, homicidal ideation. It can lead to being really irritable and argumentative. I've known people to lose their job while they're withdrawing from an antidepressant, and then when the fog clears, they're like, what the heck happened?
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
I just saw something the other day. The lady was saying it was all about perception. And, how do you know? How do you know what you're seeing, what you're feeling is not correct? Because you think it's correct.
Perceptual disturbances can happen on any level. They aren't always as noticeable as we would like for them to be. And even sometimes when you see someone and you feel like they're having a pity party, that could be because they have a perceptual disturbance and they're perceiving their life as being harder than what it is, negative. They perceive that they're unloved or alone, even when there's evidence all around them that they're not. So perceptual disturbances can take on a myriad of shapes and sizes. It's not always, hey, I think I see a giraffe walking down this hallway and there's not a giraffe. No, it can be something minute.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And some minute things, I imagine that really make, because you don't know it's there. Yeah, you don't know it's there.
Heck, sometimes people can have a perceptual disturbance believing that someone loves them when there's evidence quite to the contrary that no, this person doesn't love you at all. So that's a perceptual disturbance going on there.
That's a good point. And the opposite. Someone loves you, you don't think that.
Exactly.
Wow, okay. Lola, what do you think about, I made this note about as far as drugs, recreational drugs. There are people, once you get hooked, I mean, you're hooked, and then there's a huge challenge to get off. Your body's hooked to the drug. And I'm going to go back to something that Tommy Lasorda said many years ago. He said, I understand we need to help the person who's hooked and everything else. But before you get hooked, you're making a conscious decision to try out this drug. You're taking it, not being hooked, and that's the big mistake. But there are people that figure, I'm going to try it. We kind of talked about this off camera, as a recreational thing. And some people get hooked almost immediately because of their
predisposition.
Explain that, because,
some people are just pre-wired genetically to have addictive personalities. That's just it in a nutshell. Some people are predispositioned to, once they try something, they're going to continue to try it, and they don't have the switch that flips and says, that's enough, or that's too much, or don't do it again. And then for a lot of people, they're thrill seekers, and so the rush of using a drug or a substance leads to them continually chasing that high and wanting it more and more and more. And also, I think now we live in a culture where people are just a lot more comfortable about recreational drug use. We saw probably a span of time for a few decades where it was like being on drugs could be the worst thing that anyone could do. But now we're back to sort of a time where it's like, oh, so you want to do that? Okay.
Wow.
Sure, you have a right. It's normal. We're back to that sort of attitude. And I don't think in schools anymore they show those videos like they used to show back in the day where
this is your brain on drugs.
This is your brain on drugs, or the one where the girl smokes marijuana and then runs down the hallway and bursts through the through the glass window. That was Helen Hunt.
Oh, I remember that, really. I don't remember that one. Wow.
You remember that?
No, I don't.
You don't? Okay. Hilarious.
And I wonder if they teach, did they still teach don't do drugs, or just say no? Remember that? That was the...
DARE still exists. I remember I was in DARE, so I know that DARE still exists, but I don't know if it's as popular as it was back then.
Okay.
Yeah.
And again, I see so many people that talk about the THC, but they're buying it almost like, again, this is my viewpoint. Some people just buy it like it's like an aspirin. I'm just going to do this. Never had doing that before because they can't sleep or they're worried. And my concern, me not knowing anything, right, about your field, is that sometimes somebody wants a quick pill or a quick fix for something that's not really a huge problem with.
And that's true. Sometimes people just don't want to feel anything. And so that's really important to sort out too, because you just can't escape life. Sometimes you have to go through things and sometimes you have to allow yourself to feel. Now, if you're in danger of hurting yourself or hurting someone else, by all means, do what it takes to, get out of that sort of a dark hole.
Yeah.
But all depression isn't bad. And I know people are going to send me all kinds of stuff for saying that, but it's not. Sometimes you have to allow yourself to go through things because it contains a message. It's a message, and so you can't get that full message until you navigate it. And if you need assistance with navigating it, being therapy or medication management, you can get that assistance. By all means, you need it. But don't be afraid. It's like when people have a recurring nightmare and they're so frightened that they don't want to go to sleep. Well, go ahead and sleep and try not to wake up during that nightmare. See what's on the other side.
Oh,
because the mental messages that we carry in our minds and our unconscious have to be brought to full awareness. And sometimes anxiety, sometimes feeling sadness, all of those things are important for us to experience because A, it deepens us at a soul-based level.
Good point.
And it gives us information. We need information to know how to best navigate our lives. If everything feels pleasant and good all of the time, why change anything?
Yeah, that's a good point.
How are you going to navigate?
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
I heard an interview with Etta James. She sang,
At Last.
Thank you.
Lots
There you
of
go.
other good stuff.
And
I saw her sons in concert recently.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know her family was okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
they tour everywhere around the world and go to different symphonies and stuff, and they'll perform with whatever singer is singing her stuff. But they perform in her band, really, the band that performed with her, but both her sons are there too.
Oh, that's so
neat.
cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
So it was an interview, and the interviewer asked her about all the trials and problems she's had throughout her life, and was she sorry she went through that? And her answer was no. She said, a lot of my music, how would I be able to sing my music and really get into it had I not known the pain of this or the pain of that? So she said those experiences helped her see life, I guess, more fuller.
Mm-hmm.
That's the best way to put it. Yeah, as opposed to just having rose-colored glasses.
Yeah.
Wow. Lola, so what is let's close with this, and we didn't talk about this, so if you don't have a quick answer, we won't use it, but what is your favorite either book or movie, positive, a motivational book that you would say, hey, this is a great book or a movie?
Okay. Book is The Wise Heart by Jack Kornfield.
Okay.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful book that talks about emotions and experiencing the depth of those emotions and the highs as well. And so that's a beautiful book. Love it. Whenever people ask me, what's something I can read that's going to help me? And they're always surprised that once they start reading it, they're like, oh, I thought this was going to be something else. People like to beat them down. They want to be beaten down and told, you're crap, get up and do something for yourself. But it's not that kind of book.
Right, okay.
So, yeah. So that's a really good book. And then movie. Movie that, like,
Anything.
what deals with...
When I say movie, it could be a movie, it could be, is there like something that made you feel good or
I
just...
can think of songs that I think that people that are going through things should listen to. Like Pink has a song called Don't Let Me Get Me. It just really like captures what it's like to have a struggle, an internal struggle with oneself, and knowing that you aren't being the best to yourself or for yourself, and that literally you're hazardous to yourself.
Yeah.
And when I love that song because it just illustrates that. And when I see people with that sort of personality going, I'm like, for a while, until you're better, you're going to need to do the opposite of whatever your mind tells you to do.
Oh, that's a good point.
Because you make poor decisions. You utilize poor judgment. So if you want to do this, do the opposite instead. If you want to do that, do the opposite instead until you switch tracks and are able to get it right and keep it right. Because oftentimes people just, keep, yeah.
Yeah. I love movies and books that are about real life people
Me
that have been through
too.
incredible struggles, and then you find, you see where they are today, and you think, oh man,
Yeah.
that guy hasn't made. But when you hear about what he went through to get there, a lot of people wouldn't go through all that stuff.
Sugar Ray Leonard, his autobiography is incredible.
Really?
Absolutely.
So there you
I
go.
love biographies.
Yeah.
So biographies are great self-help books. Those are the self-help books that I read. And just anybody that I admire, I read their biography and yeah. I read Pam Grier's biography and it was really good, but there's this scene, it's like, if you can picture it, she talked about one day, I don't know if it was a lion or a tiger, but it was a wild animal that it either belonged to her. I think it may have belonged to Richard Pryor.
Okay.
It belonged to one of them. But at any rate, like a pivotal point in her life where she's like, okay, something has to change, is that they were riding down like the Pacific Coast Highway or somewhere with this wild animal in a convertible with them, taking it somewhere, like maybe a vet or something like that.
Okay.
Wild. But like if there's ever a sign that, okay, something's not necessarily normal here in this relationship, then yeah. So that's why biographies are so powerful, because they really give you a lot of insight into stuff. Because yeah,
a lot of insight, and then you realize that, again, that's why I started doing those other interviews. You realize that you think you have it hard, and then you talk to other people. You know, everybody has it hard at some point for something.
yeah,
And so, again, I find it inspirational to hear how someone who went through something and then they got to the other side.
yeah.
You know?
And A Beautiful Mind is a movie that delves into mental illness in a really poignant and meaningful way.
Yeah.
So I like that movie a lot.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, all right, Lola, this was good.
Yay!
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Y'all, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, follow us, and we'll be bringing you more. This is season 2 of Lola and Robby.
And ask questions. If this is on YouTube or wherever, ask the questions, right?
Yes, ask questions and contribute. Give us more information. We want to hear from you. We love it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks.